All right, I knew I wanted to keep going with a retro streak to keep playing some SNES games, and Final Fantasy VI was the game that I remember seeing it as a little kid at my friend's house, in that like moment of like the Magitech soldiers walking through in the intro sequence was one of the very rare moments in life. It was probably that game, probably the first time my friend showed me World of Warcraft, and I'm not sure what else ever was like you watch something with certainty, you're like, I have to play this. Like, I absolutely have to check this out. So while I think like in some ways there are other games like Chrono Trigger, which are like a better experience are like a more finely crafted adventure, FF6 still to some degree is, I think, my favorite on the system, just from like the drama of it, the aesthetic, how it looks. So I was trying to figure it out. Was am I going to play the pixel remaster? I don't like remasters. I don't like pixel remasters. I don't like Squaresoft remasters, typically speaking. So I was trying to figure out what to do. Like, do I try it like... So generally you see on some social media sites or Reddit, people will talk about the pixel remaster versus the GBA version versus the original SNES one. But I've probably played the original SNES one like six times, 7 times all the way through. So it's not that special. So going through it, I did see one comment of someone being like, to me, honestly, now that I've played Brave New World, which is this mod that I now have installed, now that I've played Brave New World, that's my classic experience. That's like my ultimate experience for the game. So 2 nights ago, Saturday night, or Friday night, one of the two, when I knew that I was trying to figure out what to play next or how I was going to do it, I spent probably 45 minutes at night reading through this PDF to like get some insight onto it. So I kind of want to go through this because this I'm really excited about, because basically this is like a huge labor of love by these two guys, and it basically locks in these characters as actually having niches in the game and cleans up the stat system so that they're actually kind of meaningful. And there's a lot of bugs in the original game. SNES games often would have release bugs or things where things wouldn't work or certain stats weren't really functioning. So not only is this one of my favorite games of all time, but they've done like a really in-depth balancing act with this game in a way that really personally appeals to me, which is characters have specific niches, and they've really cut down on the items, and they've cut down on some of the options to the game. So I'm going to take a little time to go through all this. I'm going to read some of this. One day back in 2011, a coworker of mine showed me a Final Fantasy VI ROM editor that he'd found in the worldwide pornography receptacle known as the internet. All right, relax. We got to talking about how the editor could be used to fix bugs and other issues in the game, like how some asshole left the caps lock on when he was naming everybody. This soon led to a discussion about how cool it would be if you could restrict certain espers to certain characters, beyond which the story differs depending on which of you one of you asks, since neither of us wants to assume credit for instigating this mess. What we can agree on, however, is that the resulting product is something that we're very proud of. What is Brave New World? This is a question I found myself often at odds to succinctly answer over the last 8 years. In short, it's the mechanics and ideas set forth by the original game, fully realized with the assistance of over 25 years worth of additional technology and design theory, not to mention that as a fan project, Brave New World is not bound by corporate deadlines and thus has been in active development for nearly a decade. What began as a pet project between two co-workers has blossomed into a massive community undertaking larger than either of us could have possibly dreamed. FF6 presented an unusually large cast for its time, 12 characters plus 2 hidden ones alongside a veritable slew of abilities to use with them. So this is where I'm coming at from this, because this is a game where, despite having like outstanding aesthetics and story and like a overall theme, this is a game that, to me, I always felt like the musical nature of it, like the kind of operatic nature of it, especially with the two main characters, Terra and Celis, who I think are the two main characters, honestly, though Terra is kind of like 1A and Celis is kind of 1B. The actual mechanics of the game did weaken in that, like, essentially nearly every single character can be made into anything. And the espers, you equip these espers that teach you over time what skills you have, and they give you stat bonuses, which are one of the very, very few ways to differentiate your characters. And a big criticism that I've learned recently that I never really thought about that much is that magic power as a stat completely trumps everything else in the game, because basically everything scales to magic power, and it's the only thing that really gets you to have like that fat ass late game damage, essentially. So, hey buddy, So so what they're talking about is how to differentiate the characters to make them strong in their own way is something I'm really, really interested in. But lurking just beneath the surface of the solution of choice was the harsh reality of homogeneity. This is always a word I can't ever pronounce. There was very little to individualize units who all had access to the exact same magic spells, which far outstripped their unique skills in terms of usefulness. Yeah, everyone has fight, a unique skill, magic, and item, and your unique skill basically is useful for most of these characters for the first third of the game, and then the second half of the game or whatever, your magic skills are just all of your damage. And whose statistical diversity was rendered largely moot by the fact that only one of the 4 core attributes was even remotely functional, which is magic power. Although the game would often present a variety of options at any point, Gao's list of 255 rages for example, these options would generally consist almost entirely of bad/useless ones, with a select few ranging from being overpowered to flat out broken. Often entire mechanics would be invalidated, such as Cyan's sword tech skill, not considering the power of his sword, so that the legendary blade which split the heavens in twain ultimately had the exact same power in battle as the crap he starts out with. Also, several are unattainable due to various bugs, which the original game was also full of. Brave New World seeks to offer meaningful choices to players by means of unique spell set and multiple growth options for each character, and a challenge sufficient to warrant that investment. So it's apparently going to be kind of harder. But unlike what might immediately come to mind when the average person thinks of a difficulty hack, the goal here is simply to provide a well-balanced game that acts as a vehicle for players to use the skills that their characters will require, rather than punishing and then mocking them for taking the most logical course of action. Similarly, it seeks to avoid the one road to victory approach of offering several inferior choices alongside the one intended option that anyone interested in finishing the game should choose. But far and away, the absolute best thing with Brave New World is the amazing community, blah, blah, blah. Installation, slightly different updated script. Characters. It aims to make each of these characters useful by balancing stats and abilities. This gives a brief overview. Terra and Celes are discussed together because they both still function very similar to one another. They're essentially red mages on steroids, Jills of all trades who can easily adapt to any team you put them in and who can excel in any role that they're set up for. Both lack a directly offensive special skill, and so their usefulness is largely dependent on their spells and equipment. Lucky for them, they have access to most of the game's best equipment along with more espers and thus spells than the rest of the cast. The music's still playing? Yeah, it is. Terra's main advantage are a superior spell selection and a skill that capitalizes on her beat stick nature, while Celeste is more rounded with better stats and support magic. Runic and Morph. So she has more. Wait, where's this is Terra. Terra has Morph, which is kind of tied into the story that she can change forms, and Celeste has something called Runic, where she can absorb spells with her sword. Runic and Morph have both been through some significant mechanical changes as well. The former, Runic, has been standardized to work on all white, gray, and black magic. Any spell that starts with a colored dot, but not, which is basically white is curative, gray is utility, and black magic is attack magic, but not on any blue attack magic, any attack that doesn't. Blue magic, I think, generally speaking in this game, is considered like skills that enemies have. This, along with the fact that many more enemies use such spells in general, is meant to make using skill both more intuitive to use and worth your while to do so. A few assembly hacks, discussed in Section 4, also fix some bugs it had so that it feels a lot more like a proper ability instead of a broken mess. Yeah, Kai, how's the AT-AT doing? I haven't got a picture since yesterday. He's been too busy shooting... He's been too busy in Vietnam. Regarding Morph, it is now a toggled stance rather than a timed one, and the first of several skills that aims to rescue stamina from the dump stat heap by allowing it to reduce the double damage that Terra now takes in her Esper form in return for the offensive boost that it provides. This makes using Morph a decision that hinges more on just a simple matter of Terra being charged up for it, and those who are willing to suffer the drawbacks will find that a Morph Terra is easily Brave New World's most fearsome warrior and likely will be the first, possibly only character to hit the damage cap. Here's what they look like in-game. Here's what they look like. There is a guy who has worked on the Final Fantasy series for the entire duration of the series. His name is Yoshitaka Amano. I have a coffee table book of his called The World of Amano, which is his art book, which is one of my prized possessions, which unfortunately was in the one box of books that of all my stuff in storage got some water dripping on it. So like half my Calvin and Hobbes books, one book of Western movie photography, and the World of Amano book were all ones that I had to throw out because they got moldy. Absolutely tragic, and I'm going to be replacing it, but he did the art for this game as well as essentially every other Final Fantasy game. So he often does art which is hugely sort of conceptual in nature. It doesn't necessarily match what they look like in game because this is shit from like 1994 or whatever, but he has a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful style. See? This is what Locke looks like in game, this little guy here. And this is how he draws him. At first glance, Locke appears to be nothing more than an inferior version of Terra and Celeste. He lacks their raw magical power and their massive spell repertoires, instead focusing mainly on physical attacks and healing magic. But what he lacks in their versatility, he picks back up with high speed and evasion. Neither stat featured very prominently in the original game, and Locke serves as a good example of just how significant these advantages are now. He tends toward armor of the lighter variety, and dual wielding is now baked into his weapon of choice rather than enabled by a relic. This is something they've been doing as well, is kind of forcing people to do certain things. Like, only some people can use swords. These Locke and these two and some other characters like Edgar basically all were the only people who could use the like really incredible endgame swords, because there's endgame swords like Excalibur, Atma Weapon, I guess Masamune, what I think which is in this game, which are so much fucking Illumina. They're so much fucking better than the rest of what other people can use, that you're like, your best endgame party members are the ones who stack magic power and can use these like excellent swords, essentially. I learned that books with poor air circulation mold easily. Yeah. I don't know what that means. Do you mean like just some books that are like too thick and durable? I had probably 8 boxes of books, and one of them had dripsel on the top and it turned to mold. So it's a fucking shame, but what can you do? They're all replaceable. None of them are like autographed or anything. Furthermore, his speed advantage will be felt both in his role as a healer as well as his ability to dish out physical damage much faster than most other characters can. Locke's magical abilities are also aided by the fact that he's now one of 3 characters to which the X magic abilities are restricted. This is using your spells twice. However, dual casting with Locke is something of a double-edged sword. Double-edged sword, get it? And an effective demonstration of how the more limited MP pools for the game's non-primary spellcasters relegates them to more physical roles. That said, Locke is more than capable of outperforming the gills on the magical front, but it requires a focus on building and managing his MP in order to pull off. Rounding out Locke's skill set is Steel, which is reworked to make a bit of fucking sense. Only enemies who might actually be holding some, i.e. humans, can be stolen from on Brave World. So no more stealing from mastodons, bears, trolls, goblins, etc. Trying to steal from a bear, this guy knows. Trying to steal from a bear will just get you a very dead Locke. The idea is that fewer more obvious targets for theft, along with better rewards for doing so, will make treasure hunting more attractive. You can steal from every single enemy in the game previously, and that's like kind of like an exhaustion by excessive choice. The formula has been reworked to use Locke's speed for both the odds of success and for getting a rare steal, which was previously a set 1 in 8 chance, while the successful theft now immediately refills Locke's ATB meter so that attempts can be chained together. ATB is your active time battle system, so basically your speed meter and how often you can get attacks. This not only makes it easier to rob entire enemy parties, but also upgrades Mug to a tactical quasi-multi-strike against human mobs. In stark contrast to the above, Edgar and Sabin are 2 brothers. If you have ever played Xenogears as well, the fact that they're called Roni and Rene is a writing flourish by the couple Soraya Saga and whatever the other guy's name is, Takahashi or something, who wrote Xenogears, who then used the Roni and Rene thing in Xenogears because they liked this idea so much of the 2 brothers. In stark contrast to the above, Edgar is a character whose usefulness is tied almost completely to his special skills. This guy has tools. See these things here? Where's this? Can I zoom here? Does this work? Doesn't really work. What's this do over here? Document outline? Okay. Anyway, so you see here, he's got a bunch of tools, and he's the perfect example, along with his brother, of a character who uses their skills early to absolutely bust on everybody, but they fall off in terms of late game's damage because they don't scale that well. But his tools make him so strong early, and you get him relatively early. In stark contrast to the above, Edgar is a character whose usefulness is tied almost completely to his special skills. Although one of our overall goals was to make the regular physical attacks more competitive, Edgar remains the game's one character with a clearly preferable alternative in his chainsaw and or his drill. In the original game, Edgar peaked early due to his tools being very overpowered initially, but they failed to scale well and left him with little else to do in the endgame besides dragooning. I should just say this myself. What do I have to read this PDF for? We've thus overhauled his tools and their effects in not only an attempt to keep the skill relevant into the late game, but also to reduce the gross amount of redundancy. Of specific note are his new tools, the defibrillator and mana battery, which provide a degree of support utility and allow for an alternative build that seeks to capitalize on something other than just hitting things. Of course, making Edgar a physical powerhouse is still very much of an option, and his weapons have been reworked to ensure they remain an important part of his loadout, even if they are only functioning as stat sticks. Swords provide good basic stat boosts, whereas spears have been retooled into defensive weapons that boost max HP and allow him to protect his allies. Spears now also possess the hold with both hands for more damage property, i.e. the gauntlet effect, which can combine with the inherent bonus that spears already add to jump attacks for truly amazing damage, in part because of this, and in part because of the whole unique flower thing. Dragooning is now exclusive to Edgar and Mog, and Go-Go. Go-Go is basically a mimic style character who just copies what other people do. One advantage of particular note in going the Dragoon route is that jumping is not subject to the back row damage penalty, whereas the drill and chainsaw C-section 4 below now are. Ultimately, Edgar's most notable feature in pretty much any build is likely his ability to tank. He gets a lot of HP through both his equipment and espers, and he likes his heavy armor. He also gets more than one long-range physical attack. That auto crossbow may end up being more useful in the late game than you may think. Auto crossbow is basically what you use to hit the whole enemy team for the first, quarter of the game. So camping in the back row is always an option for the king. He gets several healing and support spells to assist him in this role, but he must rely exclusively on his other skills for damage output. Sabin has been through quite a number of changes in Brave New World in order to make him fit his character archetype, whereas his brother is basically Kane from FF4 with tools and a permanent hard-on. His brother is a little bit of a flirt. Anyway, Sabin is a hugely popular character who everybody likes. He's basically your himbo, which the more I think about, the more I just believe that everyone should try to be a himbo whenever possible. If you're a man, this is an editorial aside, but if you're a man, double down to being a himbo. You want to grill, you want to make things. You don't want to be arguing online. You don't want to be doing politics. Probably shouldn't play online video games. Just do it, man. Just be Sabin. Sabin is the role model we all should learn from. Sabin has been through quite a number of changes in Brave New World in order to make blah 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 blah. Sabin now more closely resembles Yang. Yang is from FF4, and I think it was a monk-style martial arts character. You better goddamn believe I'm going to suplex the train. 10 times out of 10, baby. Suplex is also... His early blitzes, like Pummel and Suplex, are so satisfying. Aura Bolt, Pummel, Suplex, those are so fun to use. It's unbelievable. The more presence of Blitz originally relegated his regular attacks to the rubbish bin because blitzes are free. And his claws didn't even make for decent stat sticks since the best blitzes all did magic damage. This is the other big criticism with FF6, is that so many things scale with magic damage that vigor, speed, stamina don't really do much in the game. So I think this is one of the things they've been trying to fix. Taking a cue from Yang, the new name of Sabin's game is a lot of punchy elemental damage with a lot of added effects. So he's basically, I'm playing open hand, Baldur's Gate 3 monks all over again. The whole year has a synchronicity. It's all coming together. Taking a cue from... He's then forced to dual wield him in true monk style by no longer being able to equip shields. He makes up for this as well as his inability to wear much more other armor with some truly impressive base stats. Blitzes have also been reworked just as tools were in an attempt to keep them all useful throughout the game. The result is a varied skill set that provides a choice as to how to develop Sabin's stats. A Vigor Sabin, for example, will focus more... So Vigor is now your AD stat. We'll focus more on physical blitzes like Pummel and Suplex, both of which continue his status theme of setting Sap and Stop respectively. This is something else I've been reading about during this whole PDF that I'm interested in, is that Sap and Stop, status effects, actually become something you really need in combat. You can't just what they've been really clear about in this PDF is you can't just spam attack like your average SNES RPG and expect to win the game. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about all of this, honestly. The former remains the relevance, and Sap has a significant presence. Sap is kind of like a poison. There's two kinds of poison. There's sap and poison. I forget which one. I forget how they differ. Right? Or am I thinking of bio? Anyway, the former remains relevant since sap has a significant presence in boss battles. I forget what sap is. I thought it was a poison. We'll figure it out. The former remains relevant since sap has super boss battles, while the latter remains obviously useful to disable random foes. On the other hand, several blitzes are now affected by Sabin's stamina, making him one of the best users of this once useless stat. A stamina-based Sabin is a more defensive Sabin who assists his allies with Mantra and its new counterpart Chakra that restores his team's MP instead of their HP, while relying on the now stamina-based Aura Bolt and Sonic Boom, formerly Airblade, for the bulk of his damage. Interesting. So you build him with Vigor if you want to use things like Pummel and Suplex, and I assume Bum Rush as well. Whereas if you're building him with more stamina, you'll give him Aura Bolt, Sonic Boom, and the healing spells. Interesting. So the magical looking ones, probably Flame Dance as well, seem to scale with stamina. We'll find out. Early in the game, Sabin's natural stats will make him one of the most powerful and beefy characters available. Later on, his limited armor options will become more of an issue, and he'll have to rely more on his high HP pool to stay on his feet. One advantage that Sabin has in this regard is that his high vigor and stamina will help him take much more consistent damage from enemy attacks due to how they function now as a sort of natural defense. See section 4 below for details, but he still ends up eating a lot more of it in the long run than characters who can actually wear armor. Cyan. Cyan was one of the most disappointing characters to use in the game, in that if you wanted to power up his sword tech, which goes up to 8 by the end game, powering up to 8 is bonkers how long it would take during a game where the battle system keeps going even when you pause, even when you're standing still. So they think they put a lot of work into making him actually like a fun character. He's sort of like, to some degree, they call him like a Bushido style character, but in a lot of ways, his like aesthetic and approach seems to be sort of like a classic, like knight, like a classic European knight. So he's kind of like in the middle of having like a pretty samurai style and more so like a medieval knight. It's hard to tell. His kingdom is very much like medieval castles, etc. Anyway, Cyan suffered immensely in the original game for being the most physically oriented fighter in a world where magical damage reigned supreme, and shitty balance decisions made 7 of his 8 special attacks not worth the fucking lifetime it took to use them. The fucking lifetime. This guy knows what I'm talking about. He gets a much-needed overhaul in Brave New World in the form of both a new global physical damage formula that renders his style of combat no longer complete shite, as well as some additional attention to his special skills in the same vein as Tools and Blitz. From the undead vanquishing powers of Mind Blow, the dies at 0 MP flag is now used exclusively on undead foes. This is another mechanic they've done in the game, is that if you reduce a undead creature's magic points to 0, they instantly die. This is to offset the fact that you used to be able to use things like Phoenix Down or Life or healing spells to do raw damage to them. And I don't think you can do that anymore, but we will find out because I have to read this again. To the supreme physical damage of Tempest, aka Quadra Slice, that every Bushido has a purpose to fill and a chance to shine. Also, the Bushido meter no longer takes a fucking lifetime to charge. Didn't they say that before? Fucking lifetime, yeah. So they're getting a little accepts here. This is something you have to watch out in writing, is to not reuse the same 2-word phrase twice in a paragraph. Or even a page. Also, the Bushido meter and the strength of his sword actually factors into the strength of his sword skills. What a novel concept. Like Sabin, Cyan is now denied the use of shields in order to force the Inherit can be held with both hands for extra damage bonus on all of his weapons, which helps make even his regular physical blows a mighty force to be reckoned with. Also, like Sabin, Bushido blades that do physical damage... Bushido techniques, sorry, Bushido blade. I was in my PS1 era there for a second. That do physical damage will only be half as strong to those without a brave warrior spirit who cower in the back row. But even with these drawbacks, Cyan's heavy armor and earlier access to Empowerer ensures that he's just as good at taking damage as he is dishing it out. Furthermore, the overall lack of diversity in his Esper bonuses more or less guarantees he'll end up with more vigor and or HP than just about anyone else. The overall lack of diversity in his Esper bonuses. Okay. Build-wise, Cyan really only has 2 options. You either pump his vigor to solidify him as the resident king of physical damage or make him an impenetrable brick wall. Like Edgar, he has several healing spells so that he can bring his allies back from the brink whenever he finds himself the last man standing, and the fact that Empower also absorbs MP also makes Cyan one of the mod's best out-of-battle patch-up guys. All said and done, he is nothing else. He is, if nothing else, a significant improvement over the garbage he was in vanilla. He was pretty bad. Here's one of my favorite characters, Shadow, standard ninja. He's got a doggy. He has a melancholy backstory and is extremely fun to use. And he had a throw command where you can throw any equipment in your inventory. So it's pretty fun to get to the end of the game and you know you're on the last boss, so you throw the most valuable stuff in the game for huge damage. It's always fun. Being a ninja, Shadow naturally winds up in the role of fragile speedster in this mod. He doesn't use shields because ninjas have no interest in defending themselves when they can instead be dual-wielding totally sweet ninja weapons. When they can instead be dual-wielding totally sweet ninja weapons, you guys. And the armor that he wears is of the don't get hit in the first place variety. Shadow thus tends to die whenever he gets hit, but he almost never does. He does nearly end up with the same problem as Edgar, where his special skill completely outclasses his regular attacks, thus regulating him to permanent back row status, but the high price of throwables along with the option for X-Fight later in the game are sufficient to lure him out. Regarding throw, it's now restricted exclusively to knives, and stars. No more chucking swords or rods, and also each type of throwable now functions more uniquely than before. Knives tend to do the most damage, but are more expensive and only single target, whereas throwing stars can now be spread like a spell to hit a group of enemies. I should do is close Steam. Go. Scrolls is always do elemental damage that can be extremely powerful against a single target since the damage is forcibly split against multiple targets. Finally, Shadow can now set the image status, also known as blink, on his teammates rather than just on himself with smoke bombs. Known in the original game as Shadow Edges, this used to be like a very, very strong answer to physical damage. Which along with his handful of healing support spells make him an excellent utility character to have on hand. Shadow's greatest asset by far, however, is his unmatched speed. Pound for pound, Shadow has the highest DPS potential of any character in the game, due mostly to just how fast he can attack, aka how often he can attack. This is why he's balanced by being made of tissue paper. Add to this his now above mentioned support capabilities, and you get an incredible addition to any team, providing you can figure out how to keep him alive. This is an interesting twist of Final Fantasy VI, is that you are encouraged to use a lot of different party members. There are also a bunch of segments in the game where you have 3 different parties up to 4 to use, which uses most of the party. So kind of this is one of the things where do you rotate people in and out over the course of the entire game? Or do you basically have like groups of 4 that you use as teams until such a point that the other ones are under leveled and you switch in another one? A lot of it, especially in the first half of the game, is dependent on who you have due to the story, because I think those things change a lot. And there's a whole lot of different themes you can have. Gao has always been a love him or hate him sort of character. If whenever you look at like a walkthrough or a guide or something for Final Fantasy VI, they will often, these like super giga nerds who are like writing walkthroughs, will talk about the ways he's the most powerful champion in the game. But he's annoying, and it sucks to play him in a lot of ways. And most of the time, you're using him in a way where you're not even controlling him. He's just doing his own thing. What I've tried to do is make it harder to hate loving him by overhauling his rage list in the same spirit as the other special skills, thus rendering the 64 remaining rages down from nearly 4 times that amount in the original, at least as desirable as the 5 or 6 that were at all useful before, not to mention a great deal more damage. So before in the game, he could leap on, if you were in his home territory, he could leap on and take the ability kit of every single monster in the game. But that requires you to then leap on and grind every single monster in the game in a specific area of the game where you don't get experience points and every single monster in the game shows up. So that's a annoying prospect. And so it'll be some random ass thing like stray cat or something, where if you use this, you get these status effects and his auto attacks are very strong. So all these ways that he was like completely like a cheese champion. So just the same way they've done with items and other things, they've really aimed for concision here as opposed to a wide variety. The mechanics of leaping and the Velt itself have also been fixed so that those inclined to use him no longer need to invest a lifetime into building him up. Without going into too much detail, enemies without rages no longer appear in the Velt, and you don't actually have to be on the Velt to learn their rages. Stat-wise, Gao ends up drinking from the same punch bowl as Shadow. He dies in a gentle breeze. He likes to evade damage instead of taking it, and much like Shadow, he ends up fast by the end of the game, largely due to a lack of other useful stats to raise. Combined with the fact that his only means of attack requires no user input beyond the initial selection, Gao can easily be Brave New World's fastest character. In the end, though, Gao is still the same as he's always been, useful bordering on broken if used well, but very difficult to use well. As the majority of his effectiveness stems directly from proper clever use of his rages, the info found in the print me should prove especially helpful to Gao fans. Otherwise, he's designed so that even if you only grab a handful of rages, those few are at least still useful. Setzer Gabiani, Mr. Airship. I never liked using this guy. He has like a slot machine, but the slot machine, you basically press the button 3 times with your eyes closed because they basically decide for you what they do. He has sort of lame weapons. I don't necessarily fully agree or like feel fully jacked up about him being like a tanky type character because he's got like a robe on and he's like a pretty boy gallivanter, but I guess they needed more people with that niche in this game, so whatever. They know better than I do. Setzer is one of the game's major healers. He's also arguably the beefiest, with the potential to gain lots of HP and being mostly restricted to heavy armor. While his selection of healing spells is obviously important to this role, equally notable are his slots. Losing spins are now twice as powerful as they were in the original game, making for a quite effective and spammable full party heal. How Setzer likes to heal will depend on part of where his stats are. Traditional cure magic scales with magic power, as do his slots. The remedy and regen spells, however, which now restore HP in addition to their normal effects, instead scale with power with stamina, both of which are more used in Brave New World due to a larger focus on status effects, particularly sap and regen. Additionally, Setzer is one of the game's few casters of an upgraded regen spell which targets the entire party, and one of the bigger selling points of a build that focuses on stamina over. So he seems to be a magic power and stamina character in equal portions, whereas the girls are probably more of like a magic power over any other stats. There's some combination of vigor, speed, stamina, magic power, which is a good thing to remember of who's going to use which. On the offensive side of things, slots have been re-rigged to favor skill completely instead of RNG, and a magically built Setzer can be a highly effective carpet bomber if he can reliably nail spins. Physically, he has the option to dual wield, is the exclusive user of the reworked X-Fight relic, and the fact that he's unable to raise his vigor through espers means that his damage output is completely unaffected by build choice. And finally, there's GP Toss, now a free targeting stamina-based attack, and arguably Setzer's best source of consistent single target damage available. What remains consistent across any Setzer build, however, is a heavy focus on tanking damage. And unlike Edgar, who can counteract his choice of heavy armor with 2 speed boosting espers, Setzer is noticeably one of the slowest characters in the game, but that's really not a problem for him since he ultimately cares less about DPS and more about staying alive and keeping his teammates the same way. He doesn't learn a traditional revive spell like Terror or Lock, and he doesn't have the speed to play fast and loose like Realm can, so his approach to healing has to be a lot more proactive and preventative as a result. And that's not to say that it doesn't leave any room for all for fighting, just that it tends to be a roll of the dice. Here's Mog. Everybody's buddy. Even the drawings look like they're made by a kid. This is made by a professional artist who has like museum displays, by the way. Mog is something of an oddball character in Brave New World. He gets a generous selection of Esper stat boosts and a great potential to maximize him since he's an entirely optional character. But he doesn't really hybridize well, thus leading to some very unusual and rather extreme build options. Probably the most obvious choice is to focus on Mog's magic power, which boosts both the potency spells and of his offensive dance steps. With a smattering of offensive and status magic to choose from, Mog's basic style is he uses pole arms and other heavy weapons like that, but also something called Dance, where there's 8 different diverse climatological regions on the map, and if he gets an attack in all 8 of those regions, he gets these dances. So if you start with dances, he'll then dance, and then he has like he'll do a little boop, boop, and he'll have like 3 or 4 different abilities that he'll use that are largely elemental based with a lot of supportive utility tile things to do. So once you start him dancing, he's just dancing for the rest of the battle, and you gotta hope that is good, and you choose the right one. With a smattering of offensive status magic to choose from, access to the X magic ability, and the ability to equip rods, so he's a little more magic power in this game. Going whole hog and jacking with magic power is far from a bad idea. Note, however, that Dance also uses his stamina not only to determine the odds of stumbling on non-native terrain, but also to raise the effectiveness of the steps that heal the party. The 8 dances themselves have been rebalanced to be more uniquely tailored to specific builds and situations rather than just being the same thing 8 times over with different backgrounds. Water Rondo, for example, is a heavily offensive dance that will mostly be appreciated by a magic build Mog looking to deal big damage, whereas Forest Suite is a more defensive dance that can be utilized to great effect by a tankier build. It's like rain snowing out. It's so weird. Looking to build. Okay, both examples are particularly useful in boss battles, whereas other dances like Love Sonata and Dust Requiem are more suited to random count control. On the flip side, Mog can also opt to forego all of that magic crap and embrace his role as the mod's other potential Dragoon. Dragoons are people who jump up in the air, disappear for like an untold random amount of time, and then drop down for huge damage. While he may first appear to be pretty much just Edgar but cuter, he gains access to a few things that drastically set him apart from everyone's favorite perv. The least of which is a weapon type other than spears that make for viable pogo sticks. Generally speaking, Mog most likely won't be doing much attacking aside from jumping since his physical damage output is otherwise lacking. Ideally, whenever a physically built Mog isn't taking a hit from Van Halen, hint from Van Halen, aka Jump, which is a great song by the way. I remember when Ready Player One came out, they used Jump on the soundtrack. I was like, this makes me like this movie even more, even though the movie wasn't very good. That's one of those movies where I couldn't believe Steven Spielberg did it. Like, it just didn't seem like it was like his vibe, really. I was surprised by that. Maybe they needed to have him on board to get all the licensing for getting fucking Optimus Prime and Pikachu in it or whatever they had. Generally speaking, Mog most likely won't be doing much attacking, jumping. Van Halen, he'll instead be taking advantage of his spells and dances that don't rely on his raw magic power to be effective. The conclusion is that while Mog has many skills and abilities available to him, no one build is really able to take full advantage of them of them all. Instead, it's better to focus on what you want out of him and work toward that goal. Failing that, he tends to be a subpar character with little purpose other than being the adorable team/corporate mascot and a rather blatant author avatar. I don't know if that means the author of the game or the author of this mod. Strago and Realm. I love these two. They're a grandfather-granddaughter combo from a place that's the last place on Earth with latent magic powers. And Realm especially is one of those characters I always like the idea of because she's just a magical powerhouse. So what they've done is they've kind of dialed this down, which I think is very, very cool, to make Strago probably have what they say is like some of the best magical abilities in the game, but he's very slow. And she is similar in magic power and strength, but much faster, and sacrifices some raw magic power for speed, which is a really, really cool idea for these two, and gives them a niche, where before their niches was she has a sketch spell, which is kind of like an enemy copier thing for one turn, and he got to learn all the blue magic in the game by learning from enemies. So that's how they made them, again, the original game, Terra, Celes, Locke, those kind of guys who are basically your vanilla characters, would very, very consistently be the most useful ones to use. Strago is essentially Cyan's magical counterpart in Brave New World. He casts the spells that make the people fall down. He boasts the highest natural and potential raw magic power in the game, as well as an ability which makes great use of it. Lore, as you can probably guess by now, has been given the same treatment as every other skill where all in of the useless garbage has been pruned out, and all that remains is now more useful. His regular spell selection is a bit less impressive, but he does get X magic to keep it competitive / interesting. As for his equipment, Rods, Strago's weapon of choice, been reworked as viable magic-based weapons. See MP4 Crits Section 4. All of this makes him more dependent on MP than any other character to be effective in battle, and thus he's one of the few who's able to significantly raise it and one of only 2 to learn the Osmose spell. Osmose is like your magic steel. Strago's 2 main disadvantages are that he's squishy and he's really, really slow. His natural stats and armor will provide him with good magical defense, but his physical... Where was I? But his physical defense and HP will remain low. His shitty speed can be overcome with enough of the right equipment, and his survivability can be up by a decent margin with an all-out stamina build, but you really can't do both, and either one will tend to come at the expense of maximizing power. Which direction you choose will hinge mostly on whether you prefer to use him primarily as a nuker or to take advantage of his many utility spells / lores to support the rest of the team. In either case, he probably needs to stay in the back row, since the only advantage of not doing this is better spell damage from his Raj, which can admittedly be worse. Realm may seem like a pint-sized foul-mouthed version of her grandfather at first, but she's actually a very different beast. I don't remember her being foul-mouthed. She's sassy, but foul-mouthed? First off, both are glass cannons with an emphasis on powerful magic, but their similarities end there. First off, she trades a bit of her grandfather's raw magic power to get back some much-needed speed. Second, Realm possesses a handful of the game's strongest spells, both as her main advantage and as her main weakness. Realm functions well as both an offensive powerhouse and as a traditional healer, but the downside is that she has little else going on for her otherwise. Her early game offense is largely limited to Sketch, which at least works now, and her primarily healing ability outside of endgame magic is whacking her friends with a paintbrush. Definitely a late bloomer, this one. So I think they're saying that paintbrushes heal when you attack. Because of Realm's strong emphasis, that is to say her outright dependence on powerful magic, she's the only other character who now learns Osmose, so that she at the very least remains self-sufficient. Just remember that she's still quite squishy, so stick her in the rear and use her speed and offensive magic as a means to eliminate as much of the enemy threat as quickly as possible. There they are. She also, might I say, has one of like the best themes in the game, and there are 2 different characters, her and Gao, who are like secondary characters in a lot of ways, who have some of the terrific musical themes. I absolutely love them. Umaro and Gogo. These are the 2 most optional characters, and if you don't know about them, you will probably miss them if you play this game like blind. These 2 end up in Brave New World as largely enhanced versions of what I presume they were originally meant to be. Umaro, who's this big Sasquatch here, is big, strong, and hits like a truck. Due to this, he'll appeal greatly to inexperienced players that are just looking for a tank to smash shit. But because he can't really do anything else, his long-term usefulness is somewhat limited. Gogo, on the other hand, looks downright horrid on paper due to his terrible stats. His/her terrible stats. They don't really specify if this is a boy or a girl. However, the mysterious pile of rags hold great rewards for the clever player who takes the time to unlock his true potential. Her true potential. In the original game, Gogo's role was heavily diminished by the aforementioned fact that by the time you found him, your team was already full of faceless Ultima factories. Ultima is the ultimate spell you get, which does non-elemental fat-ass damage to everybody, and is basically the only thing you really want to use. But if we've at all succeeded in our goal to mold every character into a unique being, each with their own distinct advantages and disadvantages, then there's tremendous value in someone who can wield any of these advantages at will. In fact, if not for his abysmal stats, Gogo would be hands down the absolute best character in the game. And even with them, he's still very well maybe. So Gogo is someone who has you can choose which of your teammates' skills that he takes. You can customize what commands he has in combat, and he can also mimic anybody. So whatever your strongest move in, he can then move. Gogo can then mimic it on the next turn or like the next move. So there's a lot of ways that this is like your big brain, like high. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for here. It's like you can do some really, really smart shit with Gogo, or it can be totally useless. Okay, changes and improvements. Esper system and leveling. Esper restrictions. This is pretty much the cornerstone of the entire mod. It restricts the use of Espers only to characters who are compatible with them. So Espers are like your like the magical creatures that you tie to your characters to determine what stats they have on level up originally, not anymore, maybe to some degree, and what spells they learn. They're also very key to the story, but they also were made in a way which sucks to some degree in the original game, because if you have level up stats then some espers are by nature better than others. And so you can get into some like min-maxing OCD bullshit of being like, oh, I'm almost about to level up, I better check my status screen, I gotta go over here so he can get magic power +1. All that kind of shit, which is really annoying. Aside from the above, and also like endemic of the way that the game with the esper system made everyone kind of, despite their aesthetic differences, function too similarly. Aside from the above and complementary to it, most sweeping changes made in Brave New World is transforming the esper level up stat bonuses from an apparent last-minute afterthought in the game's design into the core of character development and customization. See? This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm looking for. Espers now offer the following compounding stat bonuses. HP plus 60, MP plus 40, 30 HP, 15 MP, 30 HP, 1 stamina, 25 MP, 1 stamina, 1 vigor, 20 HP, 1 magic, 15 MP, 1 vigor, 1 speed, 1 magic, 1 speed, 1 vigor, 1 stamina, 1 magic, 1 stamina, 1 speed, 1 stamina, 2 vigor, 2 magic, 2 stamina, 2 speed. Esper experience. We encountered several obstacles regarding Esper stat boosts, the least of which was that almost every stat sucked, and the most persistent of which was that FF6's leveling system was clearly not designed with Esper stat boosts in mind. This ultimately resulted in an environment where, after everything else was all said and done, players were penalized for not keeping levels as low as possible in the early game because every level gained without Espers was empty. Late game characters, this is true. So if you got 20 levels early in the game, then you were only getting like 70-80% of what you would want to get from a level because you didn't have the Esper bonuses equipped yet. Late game characters like Setzer and Strago, who you don't get till relatively late, is what they mean, like relatively late into the first act, were hit particularly hard by this, as was any character build which relied heavily on World of Ruin Espers. To balance this, stat boosts from Espers were given their own leveling system independent of regular levels. Each character starts out an Esper level, EL, of 0 regardless of their regular level, and gains Esper points, XP for Esper levels, according to the following formula. Spell points times XP divided by 8. Spell points were named for magic points. Makes sense. Esper levels use the same experience table as regular levels and cap at 25, and a character will not gain any Esper points if she has no Esper equipped, which is no longer an issue because there's an Esper bank. Yeah, this weekend I was looking for a game to kind of like keep me going before I was ready to go into the next one, because I felt like I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a break for a couple of days between games. Jumping right into the next game like this, which I was really excited for, didn't really feel like the right thing to do on Saturday. So yeah, I was kind of like in purgatory for a little bit this weekend, but I did enjoy it. I do want to play games like XCOM 2 and Gears Tactics and Phoenix Point. So I like getting a tryout for it so I can actually do a proper run at some point. And it's also really cool that Phoenix Point was developed by the guy who did the original XCOM. That's like a strong argument for the game and in favor of it. The advent of character builds eventually found itself at odds with the fact that they still had to equip Espers to learn spells, which meant a lot of battles on the Veldt and/or micromanagement experience gains to avoid gaining unwanted Esper levels. To alleviate this concern, Esper points earned in battle now go into a bank for each character, and spells are now learned by spending them in the Esper menu without needing to actually equip that Esper and fight with it. The learning rate for spells on Espers is now the cost of that spell. The maximum amount of Esper points that any character can bank at any time is 30. Okay. Okay, so I have to think about this a little bit. There's a little bit of min-maxing going on here. Similarly, Esper levels are banked in the same manner as Esper points rather than being granted immediately upon earning them in battle. This completely eliminates the need to micromanage equipped Espers for the purpose of stat gains. It also allows for a respec feature later in the game that reverts all of your spent ELs to the bank so that you can rebuild characters with different stat boosts. To spend a banked EL, just click on the EL bonus in the Esper menu. Esper junctions. The only problem with the Esper bank system removing the need to micromanage Espers was exactly that. Players no longer had a reason to care who had what equipped, since the only functional difference between them at that point was summoning the battle. To address this, Espers now provide an on-equip bonus just like a piece of equipment, such as reducing incoming elemental damage or permanently granting haste. That is completely separate from the Esper's EL bonus. Shoot, interesting. You can go into the spell purchasing summon to see the effects of the Esper when summoned. In this example, Pallador gives auto haste when equipped, but raises speed and vigor for each EL spent. The haste is a static bonus that is only present so long as Pallador remains equipped, whereas the speed and vigor increases are permanent, cumulative, and not contingent on the Esper being equipped. Characters may also mix and match EL bonuses from their available Espers to their liking, whereas only one may be equipped at any given time. Levels and experience. This is crazy, because this game used to go to 99. Character levels are now capped at 50, with a soft cap starting in the late 30s. Expected endgame levels are mid-30s. A soft cap starting in the late 30s. What does that mean? As we'll find out in the print me. Growth is otherwise linear except for 3 humps after levels 10, 20, and 30. For more detail, consult the experience level chart in the print me. Level averaging. In the original game, characters were brought up to the team's average level at set points throughout the game. This is a feature we initially removed entirely due to the above-mentioned issues with stat boosts from Espers, as well as to encourage using a variety of characters rather than just the same 4 while everyone else sits in the bench. The EL system has since removed the first problem, so we've reinstated level averaging in a manner that only addresses the second. Level averaging. There's a bunch of points in the game where you have to use all 3. Yeah. I figured. I was trying to figure out whether it meant soft cap for XP gains or for the stats you get. That's what I was kind of wondering. I figured it was what you said though. Where are we at here? Every time I look this way to look at my own face in the webcam, I completely forget where I was. Level averaging now occurs at only one point in the game aside from initial averaging that's done for each character when they join, or in Shadow's case, every time he joins up with you the World of Balance. Everyone gets re-averaged at the game's halfway mark. The game's halfway mark. Not like it's a big deal or anything. It's just the halfway mark. Nothing happens there. Everyone gets, where am I? See, I can't remember anything. Which is importantly distinct from how the game originally did it for everyone individually upon re-obtaining them. With the re-averaging done all at once, there's no longer any benefit of putting off getting everyone back. And then at the start of the Act 2, they bring everyone up to like 18. The initial levels at which characters join the party has also been changed. In the original game, most characters join us slightly above the party average, whereas now everyone except Gogo and Omaro now join the exact average. Battle system and speed. This is like mostly looking at the mechanics of how much the speed stat affects how often people attack. And they took out some of like the bullshit with it. I don't really have to go over this, but it basically shows how speed stats affect how often you're going to get turns in an average battle. Defend and row. Row is changing from the front to the back or the back to the front. And defend only take half a turn. We've edited the delays, like when you're casting spells, etc. for some of these things. These things happen immediately. These things have a short delay, mid delay, long delay, huge delay. This is jump. This is if you're a Dragoon. You jump into the air and you're gone for like an indeterminate amount of time and come back down and bop people. So summons, morphs, and X magic have a big delay. Normal magic and most people's principal unique commands are a mid delay. Short delay is your basic standard things. And no delay is like these largely like minor or secondary skills. Takes a half a turn to switch weapons. You can switch weapons from the top of the item screen. Slow and haste are because these are apparently major things. They say here the slow status is now a major element of boss fights. It was necessary to know the gap between the two speed impacting statuses. So stop, sleep, freeze, reflect, and condemned are rejigged as well. A notable result of the combination of all these battle changes is a net increase to the flow of combat due to the higher speed of all participants. As an additional bonus on top of this, in order to minimize empty downtime, the speed of combat is now doubled when neither an action or is recurring nor any character ready to act. Okay, so now we can just... Do you see this? That's what they've been saying, like regularly in it, is that like things like poison and slow, like you have to use these things in fight, and your average fight is much more brainy. And you're not just holding A to auto attack. They say like it's just not. They say later on that it's just not going to happen. Terra's morph ability. Yeah. You see this? 90x for haste. I like that they have the little imps come in here to like chit chat once in a while. See, the little imp comes in. These bars in the bottom right are all ATB bars. Note that cutting the timer for sleep in half renders its duration about the same as before, whereas stop and freeze were further shortened as an executive balance decision. Okay. So they're actually really like finding a way to use the like status effects, what they call the gray magic, like stop, slow, haste, freeze, things like that. Really cool. Terra's morph ability is now a toggled stance rather than a timed one. Rather than doubling her offensive input and halving all magic damage taken, and now boosts her output by 50% at the expense of doubling all magic damage taken. No, all damage taken. Whoa. It boosts her output by 50% at the expense of doubling all damage taken in a toggleable stance. That's actually really cool. That's exactly how I picture her in her Esper form. It's important to note that the 50% output boost from Morph applies to pretty much everything. The Morph bonus is added to damage calculations as a multiplier, which in the original game are ignored by any attack that ignores defense. This is no longer true. Defense ignoring spells and abilities now respect multipliers. This includes curative spells, which ignore defense as an obvious necessity. The above-mentioned damage penalty does not distinguish between incoming damage and incoming healing. Everything will hit her for higher numbers, except for fixed/fractional values. This means that although Terra will be more fragile in her Esper state, she'll also be easier to heal. Interesting. Okay. Steel Mug no longer takes the level of the Treasure Hunter. It's a straight-up roll against RNG that uses the Hunter's speed. Speed also affects the likelihood of a rare steal, instead of the flat 1 in 8 chance in the original game, making them more common in the later game with a little bit of investment in lock speed. So you used to be able to have a 7 out of 8 chance to get the common item to steal, and then a 1 in 8 to get the rare one. Similar to the above, successful steal attempts are now treated by the game as a free action and will immediately refill the ATB gauge of the character who performed it. See right, Lock stole, and his ATB is immediately refilled. This also applies to random steal attempts made by a certain knife. This allows the Mug command to act as a multi-attack rather than just run regular one plus a steal attempt. Weapons now retain special properties when used with Mug, such as the anti-human property of the Butterfly or Man-Eater, or the special effect of the Atma weapon. The only exception is the random anti-flying proc on thrown weapons that would look seriously jacked on a melee strike. Aside from that, however, Mug is now equal to the fight command in terms of damage. To balance the above concerns so that Mug isn't just fight, but better, Mug is when you attack and steal on the same turn. The attack will miss if the steal is unsuccessful. This includes failure due to the target not possessing an item, so Mug should only be used against enemies that are carrying something. Yeah, so you can't Mug Mastodons, shellfish, dragons, owls, eagles, little bunny rabbits. You don't mug those things. That's not how life works. Yeah, only humanoid enemies can be stolen from. Bushido. Physical damage Bushido techniques, Dispatch, Flurry, and Tempest now account for the... Bushido is sword tech. They're calling it Bushido here. Now account for the user's equipped sword to influence their strength rather than having a set power that doesn't improve with better weapons. Yeah, let me get the carrot that rabbit's holding, you know what I mean? You can mug them, I just don't think you're gonna get anything from it. Apparently they've like drastically cut down the item list. Like drastically cut down the item list and rebalanced it. Weapons now retain special properties when used with throw, namely the 2x damage to humans property of the Butterfly and Man-Eater knives. Gogo can now still use throw even if Shadow is no longer available. Throw is a regular attack where the thrown weapon ignores the user's row, the target's defense, and gets a 100% damage boost. So the fact that you lose it by throwing it is offset by the fact that this is a crazy fucking output. Good doggo. Although Shadow's dog block status provides a 50% chance to avoid any physical attack before standard evasion is considered, Interceptor would inexplicably appear less frequently later in the game than he did earlier on. This is very much true. Shadow is a very, very fun early game character to use, and when you first get him, the dog is in that battle at all times. And then at a certain point when you hit like level like 30 or 40 or halfway through the game or whatever it is, you just never see the dog again. It's tragic because the dog is so fun. He's like counterattacking, he's doing all these things. This is because after it was determined that the Interceptor had blocked an attack, the game would choose randomly from a pool of every applicable evade animation from Shadow's equipment instead of always using the dog. Correcting this does not affect Shadow's evasion at all, but it does largely increase the odds of Interceptor's counterattacks, 50% chance of countering any blocked attack, so 1/4 odds overall. So if he had a 50% chance to block, and he came 50% of the time when the dog blocked, this dog was here all the time. You had a 5th party member, but then eventually he just stopped coming. And this is the reason why. So it's really cool to see these mod editors be able to dig into the mechanics of the game so they know why things that I always wondered about in these ghetto-ass games didn't work. I now get to see the reason why. Using Sketch should no longer cause the universe to explode on itself thanks to a patch that fixes whatever the hell was wrong with the original game. Second, the Sketch... I don't know what they're talking about here, but that's funny. Second, the Sketch format now uses realm stats instead of those of the enemy, so it's actually worth using. Aside from allowing Sketch, the other feature of paintbrushes in Brave New World is that they now cure HP rather than damage it, aka the heal rod. The targeting code has been edited so that they correctly target your party by default instead of the enemy, and vice versa in the event that Realm or Gogo is muddled or berserk. So if she's equipping healing raw, if she's equipping paintbrushes, which only she can do, she has to attack her teammates to heal them. Sketch is now disallowed unless a brush is equipped. See right, because painting with the knife is something that only the psychopaths do. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, I appreciate that. Auto Swordless Runic. Similar to the brushless Sketch patch, Auto Swordless Runic keeps Celeste from spamming the ever-loving shit out of Runic when she's muddled or at the Coliseum if she doesn't have a sword to Runic with. We've also corrected a bug where runic spells would not be stripped of their elemental properties, so protection from any element would also protect Celis or Gogo from absorbing the spell's MP cost. There's some fixes on Rage. Rage used to mess up where if he had status immunities and then died and did a new Rage, the old status immunities would stick through. Okay, so now the Rages are done alphabetically. The leap command can now be used on any rageable formation, regardless of whether or not you're in the Veld. While this does give Gao earlier access to some key rages in certain areas, it's mostly a quality of life hack that allows it much easier to collect all of his rages. Unlike before, leap no longer ends the current battle, rather remove Gao from the party for its duration. He's counted as dead for the purpose of what happens if the rest of your party wipes. He will learn the rages of the enemy party whether or not you win the fight and run. This was annoying before, because like if you're trying to collect Gao's rages, he would leap off and you wouldn't be able to finish the battle, so he just jumps on one guy and then you just hope that he gets all of the people who are in the party. You have to just hope that he gets those rages. It's easier to get rage and dance odds. You now use slots with skill and timing as opposed to the game basically deciding what for you, what you're gonna get. Furthermore, the bar 7 instant game over spin has been disabled. That's pretty funny. The formula for GP toss, aka GP rain, has been reworked to make it an attack actually worth using, particularly for stamina-based Setzer. So this is when you throw your money at them and it does good scaling damage. You're right. So now he can no longer end the game with the wrong spin. I appreciate that. Umaro has 4 attacks, a regular fight attack and 3 special ones, 2 of which are enabled by specific relics. If you count the fact that his base stats and the battle power of his bone club have been readjusted, all 4 of them have been changed in Brave New World. Tackle, which is always available, is basically just his regular fight command set to ignore defense. Because of Umaro's base battle power combined with that of his weapon gave his regular attacks a maxed out battle power of 255, this is basically his equivalent of Bum Rush. The unnamed character toss ability enabled by the Storm Belt was initially just tackle set to add the battle power of the character being tossed to Umaro's. However, since battle power is an 8-bit value, red, it caps at 255. This didn't end up being as significant as it was meant to be. In other words, it was a clone. Look at this. Look at these 3 words over on the left side of Umar. This is so creepy. Why would you do that? Just put these over here. I can't read this. This is like Bone Apple Tea. It was a clone of Tackle, and now it was a set power of 255 with a gauntlet bonus applied for an effective power of 382. Further, it now deals critical damage if the target being thrown is Mog, as originally intended to, but didn't because of a bug. As always, Umaro will prioritize throwing allies with the muddle or sleep status, as this attack will remove them. Birds yelling at me outside. Blizzard, formerly Storm, which the Blizzard Orb Relic enables, no longer does half damage, aka split loss, if more than one target is present. Its power has been lowered slightly, but Umaro's stats more than make up for that. Note that this is the same Blizzard attack that appears in the Snowman Jazz Dance, with 2 notable distinctions. 1, it uses Umaro's stamina to determine its magic rather than its non-existent magic power. 2, it bypasses the enemy's stamina check to see whether or not it says mine. 1 and 3 Yeti attack. The odds of each attack being used have also been adjusted. Previously, they varied depending on whether Umaro had 1 or both of his special relics equipped. Having both on was often undesirable, as the odds of Rage or Storm being used were higher if only the special relic was equipped. To simplify things, all 3 of Umaro's special attacks now have a hard 76 out of 255, roughly 30% chance of being used. Otherwise, Umaro will use his regular fight command. This gives fights a 179 out of 255 chance of being used if neither special relic is present, or 40% if one is equipped, and 10% if both are. Bare Naked Yeti. Finally, Umaro's equip menu is no longer locked down, so that you can now unequip him just like a normal character. This change was made purely to correct a bug in the original game, wherein the unequip all your dude wouldn't take Umaro's relics away, since it would also remove his other equipment that you'd then have no way to put upon him. Yes, we're aware that the snow muffler he comes with in vanilla is meant to be his natural fur coat, which is why it can't be taken off of him. We'd like to think that your party shears him like a sheep. Alright, that's fair. Okay, physical damage and evasion. The physical damage formula has been changed. In addition to determining physical damage dealt, Vigor now helps reduce incoming physical damage as well. The back row now only reduces incoming physical damage by 25. Outgoing is not only still halved, but the penalty now extends to melee damage dealt by Tools, Blitz, and Bushido. So they really are like stopping you from cheesing some people by putting the back row, even if they're like melee type stuff, is still effective. For clarification, the only 2 commands that inherently deal row ignoring physical damage regardless of weapon are jump and throw. Everything else does not ignore what row you're in. Blind accuracy. Further above, the blind status renamed from dark. Now affects steal chance and all physical and stamina based damage from special kills, all of which remains otherwise unblockable. Sketch, being classified as a magical attack, is a notable exception here, as is the chance to steal from enemies. Also, hitting something in the back is now affected by blindness, whereas before a back attack would never miss under any circumstance. Blindness also isn't circumvented by weapons that never miss or by relics that grant perfect accuracy. There's no backstab bonus in pincer or flank moves. Evade, bug fix, physical and magical evade. These are like the classic SNES bugs that you don't really know about unless you're like a super like hardcore about it. Physical and magical evasion now function properly instead of magical evasion covering both types and physical evasion doing nothing at all. This is like luck not affecting crit or agility not affecting dodge in Trials of Mana. For the sake of simplicity, the accuracy of all avoidable attacks, both physical and magical, has been set to 101%. So they don't that the chance to hit is simply evasion divided by 128%. 128 and then end bracket percent. Of note is that while many foes in Brave New World do possess physical evasion, they do not have magical evasion. Thus, any magical evadable attack will only miss against the player. Exceptions: Drain, Osmos, which suck health or magic, and Rock Meteor, which I guess get to miss because they have big effects to them. Fixing the evasion system awaken a dormant mechanic from deep within the game's code, wherein physical attacks will gain accuracy, bonuses, or penalties if the target a certain status is set. Some of these made sense and were left alone, like how being slowed, blinded, muddled, or zombied will now make the afflicted easier to hit. Others, mostly the re-rise, aka Life 3 status being subject to the same penalty, were fucking stupid and thrown in the trash where they belong. The big issue, however, wasn't with the accuracy bonuses, but rather the penalties when attacking targets affected by the haste, sap, poison, or near fatal statuses. Not only did none of these except haste make any sense, but their newfound ubiquity in Brave New World, haste and sap in particular, made balancing the physical game hell. Parry and counter. A functional evade system combined with several characters who are very much built for lock and shadow come immediately to mind render the randomly counters property less than useful, since characters could originally only counter attacks that had successfully hit them, which in Shadow's effect usually left them too dead to retaliate. We have removed this requirement, thus allowing the likes of Lock and Shadow to parry and counter to their heart's content. I really think they're saying that like if Shadow gets hit ever, he's gonna get killed, but he has an insane evasion, which is pretty fun. Okay, stamina overhaul. In the original game, stamina did as close to nothing as a stat could possibly do without actually doing nothing. Its main purpose was to act as an extra layer of evasion against instant death attacks, a role which is expanded here to include fractional damage, i.e. Demi, which cut your health in half, HP, MP drain, MP damage, and all the status effects. To further emphasize the role of stamina in defending against such things, it is now the only evasion check against them. Further to the above, stamina is now able to consider only the statuses set by attacks that also deal damage. What? Further to the above, stamina is now able to consider only the statuses set by attacks that also deal damage. Okay. Such attacks will use a regular or magical evasion to determine his success, and then runs a stamina check if the attack hits to see if the status also gets set. As with regular evasion, stamina checks are a stamina divided by 128% chance of success. All of this is greatly simplified in the print me by means of listing the relevant evasion stat, stamina, or M-evade for all avoidable attacks. Those are the stepper stamina check for just the status. Use the verbiage may set instead of sets. Any attack that uses stamina as its primary evasion stat will show the latter, since the former would also be double dipping. Would just be double dipping. Note, while enemies in Brave New World don't have magical evasion, they do possess stamina. The range of values is lowered here from 17 to 40 to 1 to 32. This is done so that weak enemies remain vulnerable to status effects, while those which work on bosses, sap and slow, retain at least a 75% chance to hit. Vigor, stamina variance. In addition to helping you avoid most of the nastier effects of magical attacks, stamina now also acts as an additional layer of defense against their primary effects in the same manner that vigor now reduces damage. This is done via the game's random variance formula, which is applied to every attack that doesn't do a set amount of damage. I need to write something down. Link to PDF in FF6 intro video. I'm going to separate this whole thing from part 1 when I put it on YouTube. I have to put a link to this PDF when I do the video. So Vigor does physical damage and reduces physical damage. Stamina reduces your chance and the potency of magical attacks or status attacks, while also giving you health, I believe. Less broadly, stamina is now a factor in several spells, attacks, commands, replacing the role of magic in most cases, making it more individually appealing to the characters that use them. This includes Remedy and Regen, Harvester and Sunbath, Rock, Tentacle and Shrapnel, Aurabolt, Sonic Boom, Mantra, Chakra, Bushido 5, random wind attacks from certain weapons, Dance, Morph, GP Toss, Blizzard, Atma Weapon, Desperation attacks. Desperation attacks are the like extraordinarily unique attacks that your character might do when they're at like a wounded near death status, which are like the most insane damage abilities in the game and very, very cool. And it's cool to see all of them if you play this game, but you might only see a couple of them in the entire playthrough. No, not this Atma Weapon, the other one, Kupo. Thanks, Mog. To be clear, all of the above except for the Atma Weapon are considered magical attacks for the purpose of the back row damage penalty and the 25% plus 25% physical magic damage property on certain relic spears. Exception: Aurabolt is short range despite being non-physical. Yeah, everyone like you'll be there and your guy will have like 5% health, and then like a little title will come up on the screen. You're like, I thought I was just attacking, and it'll be like last stand. Or everyone has like a different unique name for it, and they do like just some bonkers attack that's so powerful and always looks really interesting. It's a nice touch. Tank and Spank. Counter to the above, which sells stamina as an alternative attack stat with some defensive capabilities, we wanted a way of meshing it with the other stats in a meaningful way. It was thus decided that it should be tied to 2 equipment-enabled abilities, cover and counterattacks. As was the case in vanilla. It looks like stamina is either your primary or secondary stat for most people, and very rarely would you not use it at all. Like if you do something like Vigor or Speed or something like that, like if you're Shadow, like you have no defenses at all. Or magic damage speed if you're one of like the heavy magic users, but basically you do like stamina and magic if you're like Setzer or someone like that, or you'll do stamina and vigor if you're someone like Sabin. As was the case in vanilla, characters with true knight equipment will always take hits for allies who are at near fatal status. That's the status with the special attack. The small chance of the special attack, even if they themselves are also critical HP. Now, in addition to that, guardians who are not in critical status may also take hits for healthy allies, like Cyan manfully throwing himself in front of the healthy yet very squishy realm here. There are some caveats to this. The defender must be in the front row to cover at all. The target, if not at low AP, must be in the back row. Interesting. Really interesting. That's really cool. Further, a character's evasion is halved when covering an ally. The odds of covering a healthy ally are double if the character is defending, but the defense status is broken and its bonus lost if a cover occurs. Interceptor will also not show up if Shadow is covering someone else. For the Spank half of things, the game's original counterattack rate was 75%. We found this to be excessive once we got other things sorted out, so we opted for a new formula that bases the counterattack rate on stamina. Okay, this is so complicated. I love it. The formulas for regen and sap/poison, all of which are much more prominent here than they were originally, have been edited to allow stamina to contribute more significantly toward raising the amount of HP restored by the formula, while now actually defending against the latter. Originally, stamina raised the damage dealt by sap poison. I guess because it was a percentage? Yeah, I guess so. Poison works in a manner similar to sap, except that it only ticks half as frequently and each tick deals incrementally more damage. Originally, the increment value is equal to the value of the initial tick. We have halved the increment value to keep poison from being too detrimental of status, given the lower overall HP totals of player characters compared to the original game. We've also corrected an error, but this is possibly intentional. I can't even read right now. In the original code, wherein the variable that increments with each tick doesn't reset when the status is cleared, so poison ticks will now start back over at the beginning of the status is reapplied to the same enemy in the same battle rather than picking back up where they left off. That makes sense. The 25% magical damage relic property on earrings, I assume, had several odd effects in the original game, only one of which, that could be stacked despite the fact that its physical counterpart couldn't, seemed to be intentional. It was being applied to periodic damage, i.e. sap poison ticks, even allowing them to go over the 8-bit cap, and was not being applied to curative magic. All the above issues have been fixed, and the equipment that offers 25% bonuses that now use the word output instead of damage indicate that the bonus also applies to curative abilities. While it won't affect those with set outputs such as Sabin's Mantra and Chakra Blitzes, it will affect things such as Edgar's Defibrillator and Mana Battery tools, or Harvester and Sunbath. Edgar has 2 new tools apparently called the Defibrillator and Mana Battery, which is, I assume, are a Resurrector and plus MP. Vanished Doom is removed. If you've never played this game, you could lower your enemy's magic resistance by turning them invisible, which would make them basically functionally immune to physical attacks, but then things like Doom and X Zone, which are instant kills, they would work even on bosses. Yeah. The other thing you could do, you used to be able to do, is throw a Phoenix Down on an undead enemy, and it would one-shot kill it, because Phoenix Down is like your your resurrection spell item. In Brave New World, all items, except for dried meat, which you need in the Veldt, are hard-coded not to work on enemies. Okay. Boss immunity, which originally prevented suplex from targeting certain enemies, primarily those of the floating or stationary variety, is now a hard override to prevent fractional damage attacks, aka i.e. Demi and Quarter, which are like percentage HP reductions, from being cheesed against bosses. Such attacks were set to miss anything immune to instant death, so instant death attacks were thus always preferable. Fractional damage now deals earth and or wind damage and follows suit with other earth and wind attacks by being generally very powerful, but unable to hit a weakness due to the lack of them. And yes, suplex works on everything now. Have fun pile driving Kefka. There we go. I've been meaning to suplex that motherfucker for a while. Genji Glove fix. Dual wielding weapons now results. I love suplex too. It's so fun. Dual wielding weapons now results in. The funny thing about Sabin is that his early, like first 4 to 5 or 6 blitzes, Pummel, Aurabolt, Suplex, Fire Dance, Airblade. Those are so fun. And then the other ones are like okay until Bum Rush, which is obviously very good. Dual wielding weapons now results in a 25% decrease in damage from both weapons as originally intended to do. Note that this patch has been modified from the original version to only affect regular physical attacks instead of all attacks that deal physical damage. Dual wield property is now attached to certain weapons rather than to a relic. Any weapon possessing the dual wield property allows the second weapon to be used regardless of whether or not the second one allows for it. A sword and dagger combination, for example, is a valid setup. The only exception to the above is spears, which are disallowed in dual wield setups. This only affects Mog, because they spend most of the Delbet running Mog with a spear boomerang, and Sin Shizzy, who was the coder, thought it was stupid. Holding certain weapons in both hands now increases the battle power by 50% rather than 75%. This was done because, as with the dual wield property, two-handed functionality is now applied to specific weapons rather than enabled by a relic, and the game's original bonus led us to some balance issues. The battle power for these weapons is now accurately displayed in the equipment menu. So things like dual wielding and things you hold in both weapons are now like basically almost mandatory for some characters, it seems like. Like I think Cyan dual wields, like double hands his sword, and Sabin dual wields claws. He's punching. I'm going to use a controller. I have a PS4 controller that I basically just use for everything, which seems to be like pretty easily calibrated with RetroArch. I haven't had to do anything until I customize anything so far. Two-handed weapons. Finally, note that using two hands for weapons that allow it. The way that, from what I recall over time, the way to do blitzes on keyboards, or just do blitzes in an easier way generally, is you can just use double taps. Like Fire Dance, which is a swoop from left to right, you could do left, left, down, down, right, and it would always work. Or for Aurabolt, you could do down, down, right, or down, right, right. I think it's down, down, right. So any of the ones that had like the Street Fighter style sweep, you just double inputted them and it would always work. You can try this out in the old SNES version, and I'm sure it'll probably work on like emulated version as well. But like, yeah, Fire Dance was left all the way down to right. Just do left, left, down, down, right. Or up, up, right, right, down, down, left for Airblade. It's either, I think that's the way, I think that's how you do it. My muscle memory is telling me for Airblade, which is a sweep from top to left, was up, up, right, right, down, down, left. But it could be up, right, right, down, down, left, left. But I think it's the former. But you could always do that in the original game and it would work. Finally, note that using two hands for weapons that allow it is entirely optional, except for Cyan, who note as above is forced to do so by his equipment restrictions. Specifically, giving Edgar or Mog a spear and shield, the Sparta setup is allowable even though it looks like a game doesn't want to let you do it. To further illustrate this, an empty offhand will now turn yellow instead of gray if a two-hand weapon is equipped in the other one. Smart cover. This fixes the protect allies' effect to behave more intelligently than before. Primarily, it disables blocking attacks that originate from your own team under most circumstances, which is a significant benefit in preventing party members from being protected from healing weapons. Muddled Zombies characters will now be allowed to hit themselves, but not their teammates. Other notable important change in light of the fact that characters can now cover non-critical allies is that cover will no longer activate on an enemy counterattack, only proactive stripes. The defend battle command now halves both physical and magical damage instead of just physical damage. This is a rather important hack for the crazies who are trying for a level 1 go-go. Imp is always one of the most misunderstood effects in Final Fantasy VI, since it wasn't very upfront about what it did, and even it didn't seem to have a very good idea of what it was trying to be. It was a weird sort of offensive debuff mute hybrid that didn't behave the same way on enemies as it did in your party, and don't get me started on how buggy the animation was. Now Imp is a simple output debuff, 50% off everything both offensively and healing wise. Is basically the exact opposite of Morph, except that it doesn't affect incoming damage. Attacks and spells with fixed or fractional damage are also unaffected. This is explained further in the morphology section. Hey, get out of here, this is my section. Imp's pissed. Elemental mixing. They've sort of rebalanced life because they thought it was unfair that life, which cost a ton of MP, was the same as a Phoenix Down, which you can get totally ubiquitously. So life now is a flat 250 to 500, which is very good early and increasingly useless or less useful later. Phoenix Down, conversely, is no longer ever able to bring a character to safety, as it now restores them to only 1 HP. This is a good significant nerf for most players. This is a less significant nerf than most players realize, since the maximum HP values required for 1/8 of it to absorb even a single attack are quite high. What? There do now exist Phoenix tiers, which will restore 75% of a character's max HP, but they are rare and in short supply. They're probably like at Mega Elixir levels of rareness. So now they buffed tonics and potions to now restore 1/2 and 3/4 of a character's max HP. This used to be 50 and 250, but you could get infinite amounts of them, allowing them to remain useful throughout the game without being overpowered early on, though the latter is now quite expensive. Ethers follow suit with potions, while the rare X potions and X ethers are now more useful by virtue of targeting the entire party. That's so crazy. In the original game's code, any command could be made to target either living or dead targets, but never both. This hack fixes that, which allows the Kirin summon in 7 slots to result to both heal living allies and revive dead ones. Reflect has a 1 in 3 chance of wearing off each time it's actually activated by reflecting something, but it never fades off unless that happens. That's the same thing with image / blink. These are all just like little mechanic things about things retargeting and self-attacks. Interesting. Relics, which grant statuses when the wearer reaches critical health, now reset on death of the user instead of only going off once per battle. This allows them to be triggered whenever a dead character is revived with a Phoenix Down. That's nice. Ribbon Ribbon used to be the best relic for guarding against status effects, including literally all of them. Ribbon now only guards against stop, petrify, and instant death, and that first one is most noble since the game's code originally did not allow for any equipment to block stop. Similarly, it's also impossible for equipment to offer protection from the slow status, and while it can block sap, it will also block the regen status because whatever wrote this nightmare was on crack. With this in mind, Brave New World instead offers immunity to these statuses by means of equipment that inherently grants their counterparts haste and regen, respectively. Enemy design follows suit, with immunity to sap and slow being non-existent outside of inherent regen and haste. On a total detour, I read something today on Twitter that Jamie Oliver successfully sued McDonald's for like the way they've been processing chicken and ground meat being like hazardous to humans. And like apparently a lot of like McDonald's franchisors are like committing to changing it. But like when they go into the description of what happens to like ground beef and like chicken in terms of being prepped up for burgers and nuggets, it was like the most distressing thing I've read in a while. Like fucking getting like ammonium washed to like fill up the beef patties and everything like that. Oh my god. I don't really eat those things, and I've always found that McDonald's red meat has made me feel sort of nauseous, but I wouldn't mind some nuggets once in a while. But apparently it's all the non-meat parts of the chicken, like processed into like a paste. Oh, so upsetting. Enemy encounters, irregular encounters, conditional behavior, 10-step battles, formation odds, vindication, melee MP counter, death counters, X magic counters, life cycles. So boss is gonna have more HP in the game. Special weapon effects: Tangle, Wind Slash, Cleave. Things that used to do, things now do critical damage that used to. Anything that causes a chance of instant death will now do critical damage to things that are immune to instant death. Same thing with Chainsaw Massacre. This is the problem. Chainsaw was Edgar's best tool, but it had a 1 in 4 chance of doing like the one-shot attack, which means it was useless on bosses. You have to use the drill instead, which did less damage. Ignores defense. So different weapon stuff. Atma weapon now is a different formula. Atma weapon is now something that scales with health even more so than before. Still not this one. Mog is reminding us this is the wrong Atma weapon. Weapons that consume MP for automatic critical hits now cost an amount equal to 1/2 the user's level rather than... I remember this. When I was a wee little lad playing this game for the first time, I just randomly equipped whatever my new sword was. And this sword was something that used MP to guarantee crits in every attack. And I was in Zozo as like a poor little lad. And I had no idea why I was like constantly out of magic points. And I was constantly out of magic points. I was using all my ethers. And I had to quit the game in Zozo because I completely ran out of restorative item and I had no idea what was happening, and later realized it's because I was using the runic edge. Yeah, it was sad. It's a sad story. Okay, these are all various like little mechanic things for items and relics. Attaboy. He's cruising up the ranks. What do you think of the set so far? Have you played enough TFT sets to know which ones are your favorites? Like, when did you start playing? Okay, this is kind of important. Battle information display. In the original game, 6 different status effects were represented by a colored aura glowing in the affected character. The issue is that only a single aura could be shown at a time, leading to obvious problems with figuring out which characters have which statuses. In Brave New World, only the safe, shell, and reflect statuses, which I recall correctly were like yellow, green, and like kind of purpley, were displayed with an aura, and those auras now cycle to show more than one. When choosing a friendly target, blah, 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 a panel appears to display any status effect present on each character. That's only for friendly opponents. You play since X1? Since set 1? That's nice. I've played each set for like... Yeah, I've probably played a good chunk of them. There's some ones around like 6, 7, 8, like Gizmos and Monsters. Monsters Attack I played a little bit, but like Gizmos and Gadgets. And some of those middle ones I didn't play because I wasn't playing. I didn't play a ride game between 2021 and the end of 2022. So it's about a year and a half. Good time. Scan is now free. It helps you with that. Compact spell list. Holding the select button in battle will now target between whichever of ATB and magic max HP is set as default in the config menu and the other of the two. This is particularly important since, as mentioned above, the presence of all speed-based statuses is now conveyed by the ATB bar. Spell dots. Spell dot means that it's clear which type of spell is getting used. Text color. Informative miss. Whenever an attack which sets a negative status, in addition to dealing damage or not, fails to set that status on a target, it will display one of 2 failure messages. Fail, status was resisted. Null, target is immune. Got it. I can figure that out. So how do you like this one? Do you like it? Do you think set 10 is as strong as it seems to be? Okay, this is mostly just talking about UI. You're no longer allowed to optimize to give yourself free equipment. New window style. Added a new window style as the default one, with the old default style replacing number 8, which is only used by mental patients. If you've ever played Final Fantasy VI, I think you know which window number 8 was, and it was definitely for absolute maniacs. Yeah, I find the headliner chosen mechanic is stressful, but has a lot of upper benefits. Okay, this game gives you more save points, and some of them are full recovery points. They've also removed sleeping bags and tents from the game, so they're basically saying that they want dungeons to focus as like a war of attrition that really wears you down over time. I like that a lot. You can now use the B button to dash without sprint shoes the entire game, which is lovely. You can set that so that you naturally sprint and can press the button to walk, which I like for lore purposes. I like any game where there's a walk button, and I like walking in certain circumstances. That's so fun. The rest of these are mechanical things, bugs and unknown issues. So, there we go. So that is my exhaustive 83-minute reading of the PDF. There's also one other thing here, which I think is... There's also something else in here, which I put into the other folder, called the print me. I want to look at this for a second to make sure. This is, I think, just all the mechanics and like the number crunching of the game. Okay, have fun. I do really enjoy this set a lot. It's taking a lot of brain power to play set 10 TFT, but I think like the bands and the way that like the different verticals change the music and just generally how many different styles there are, I think is really, really fun. And a lot of people have exciting abilities. So this looks like an insane breakdown of all of the parts of this game that I'd rather just learn by playing it. What items are available in which towns, which espers do which things. Here's all the magic breakdown formulas and numerical setups. Oh, here's the zoom button. I've been waiting for this one. Look at this fucking game. So hopefully most of these things are apparent in-game. And that's it. Okay, so there's your full breakdown. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go make myself a protein shake and whatever else I need to then do a full afternoon session. So I'm going to take a short break but leave stream on. And then I'm going to start again in like, I don't know, hopefully less than 15 minutes. I'm going to leave this video on to get some music going.